I want to introduce you to the panel today, and many of these people you would recognize, some you might not. So I'm going to start at the far end. This is John Halvorsen. I'll just give you a short little story. John his parents were ambassadors from Norway, and he was raised in Ottawa. And I came into grade 9 in high school, and I thought I was pretty hot stuff because I won a bunch of the club races. And so I get to my very first high school race, cross-country race, and I take off, and I think I'm going to just walk away from this. And I'm in the lead, and I got this, somebody's with me, right? And I don't know who he is. And so I think, okay, well, I'll just throw in a surge, and that'll be over. So I throw in a surge, and it isn't over. And so then I throw in another surge, and the guy's still there. And it's like that scene from Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Who are these guys, right? I have no idea who this guy is. And I slow down, trying to get him to lead, and I do all the tactics I can think of. I can't break this guy, he outkicks me. And then at the end, they're like, who are you? My name's John Halvorsen. Well, John went on to 2 Olympic finals. He placed 10th at the World Cross Country in his home country of Norway, which I think that kind of gets you a statue in the city square, but he hasn't admitted to it.
It wasn't with skis.
It wasn't with skis, so no. John was a very successful cross-country. Did you win offs at cross-country skiing?
Maybe.
Yeah, he was right up there. So he's not only a good track cross-country runner, but an amazing skier too. And so, John, your best was 27:20?
43.
27:43. See, I could have given you 20 seconds.
You could have.
Yeah. So that's John Halvorsen. Rachel Cliff. Rachel is, well, you know Rachel because she's a BC athlete. Rachel is 21 for 10K. She's a star on the road, track, and cross country. Rachel was 25th at World Cross Country, and you guys appreciate just how incredible that is. I mean, cross country, you get the best athletes from all types of different events, from probably 1,500 right up to marathon. So 25th, 2 years ago, 3 years ago now.
I think, yeah, 3.5.
In Poland.
Yeah.
You can say it, and I can't.
Poland?
No, I can say Poland. I can't say where it was.
Oh, yeah, I can't either.
These names where they don't have many vowels, it's like I'm always there, like, I'd like to buy a vowel. I don't know.
It started with a B, it had a lot of Z's in it.
What's that?
Bidgosh.
Oh, that's good.
Pronounced with a Z.
Bidgosh, I can do that. Okay, and this is Natasha Wodak. Natasha is our national record holder for 10,000 meters. She was a Rio Olympian. How many World Cross Country teams?
I've been to 2 World Cross.
2 World Cross. Like always, a big star up at the front, and also a big road star too. So, this is Lucy Smith. Lucy has she's doing the cross country tactics seminar or session in a few, like at the end of this. Lucy's won the national cross country championships 5 times, also 5-time World Cross Country championships. And
I didn't win them.
What's that?
I didn't win them.
You didn't win Worlds 5 times. No, that, yeah, we would have had to kill the fatted calf to bring in. Actually, it's interesting. We had John Noguchi, and he was kind of thinking about coming here once, but we had to fly him from Kenya, so that kind of killed that plan. Lucy, one of the things about Lucy, and I kind of inferred this or talked about it last night, is Lucy went to national cross country championships, and she often would win it. Although on paper, she wasn't probably the favorite athlete. So she was just like an incredible tactician, really tough racer on the day. So in terms of a cross-country panel, you guys just won't get better than this. So this is just a fantastic opportunity to hear about how people approach cross-country, to ask some of the questions that you've got about cross-country, and to hear from the stars as to, you know, what their memories and stories are of the event. So, why don't we start with some stories? And Rachel, I'm going to start with you, because it always kind of goes back and forth on the line. But I'm going to pick people in the middle here. Rachel, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us a story about, you know, your best cross-country race? Just kind of tell us some stuff about it.
It's actually a lot, which sounds cheesy, but I'm trying to think of the actual best one. I think for me in high school, the one that really stands out was in grade 12. I was just starting to get into competitive running. Like I'd always done it, but never at the club level or anything. And I'd always stopped at BC high school, so I just loved BC high schools, but I would stop after that. And this year, I just started joining Graham Fell and training with him. And he encouraged me to do nationals cross country. And I remember he gave me this goal of being top 25 or something. And he just said, you know, come around the first lap and try to be in the top 30 and then work your way up past there. And I was so mad at him because my goal was just to like be in the top 50. Like I didn't think I could be up at all. And I remember being almost angry at him that he wasn't giving me a good race strategy, and I came through right where he said, and I ended up coming 8th overall. So
Wow.
that was kind of one of the moments that really got me into competitive track. So, yeah.
Very cool. Lucy, how about you? What was kind of, if you had to tell the story of your best cross-country race or favorite cross-country race, what would you say?
For me, well, there was a few, but I'll tell you one thing, all the coaches in the room, my coaches can tell the stories better than me, because often on the day I just was so like almost blind to anything but the start to the finish. But probably Quebec City was my third CIs. It's called CIS now. When I was in university at Dalhousie, it was called CIAU. And I'd done 2 years of university already, and I had pretty good races, but you know, I think I had a 5th in my first year, was sick out here in Victoria in my second year and came 12th. In my third year at Dal, I really hit my stride. I learned how to train, and I took everything I could from my coach, and I learned how to race. And we hit the Plains of Abraham, which was where the CIs were that year in Quebec City, and we got. On race day, it was stinky. It was like this yesterday. It was like raining hard, and it was super windy. It was windy, like sideways windy. And I remember going into the second lap with a group of women, and we hit the wind again, and everybody slowed down. And I'm like, God, I gotta get away from these women. I want to win this race. And I just took off, and I thought, I'm just gonna take off into the wind and see what happens. And I took off into the wind, and I gapped everybody, and everybody else just stayed together, and they slowed down, and they drafted off each other in the wind. And I took a huge risk, and I kept on going and going. I kept on looking, waiting for somebody to come, and nobody came, and it was, but it was when Bruce was talking about tactics, it became one more sort of toolbox for me. And it wasn't about being the fittest athlete out there, but using the course, using the athletes, and reading the pack and being able to make those split-second decisions, and I ended up winning in Quebec, and it was my first national championships that I won as an athlete at university, and it was very rewarding.
Yeah, and just so you know how windy it was 80-kilometer-an-hour winds. And actually, John won the men's race, so you've got the men's and women's winners from that year of the Canadian University Championships.
John and I shared a lot of banquet podiums.
That's
I
right.
remember.
Yeah. So so John, why don't you tell us a story about one of your best?
I mean, probably my favorite. There's two stories that come to mind, but my favorite is World Cross Countries at home in '89 in Norway and finishing 10th there. Probably there was a lot of pressure. I was running quite well. I'd been finalist in the Olympics in '88 in the 10K, so there was a lot of expectations. I went out. Everyone knows about the World Cross Countries. The first 400 is sub 60. It's kind of like the opposite of a normal race where you sort of pace yourself and then finish hard. It's all out to begin with to get a good start. It was incredibly muddy, and I don't really actually like the muddy courses, but I went out hard, and at one point actually managed to get up to the 3rd position, which was pretty exciting. But faded a little bit at the end and ended up in 10th. I think it was 3rd European for me, which was great. But it was just a fantastic experience. The atmosphere, the weather was beautiful. It was just terribly muddy. So that was a huge event for me. The other one that I remember is the one where I actually got injured the day before, and had a terrible race actually at the DNF, but I was running at the very front, feeling like I was in control of the race. We could have taken the pace, which was that was the year after. I was in really good shape, but busted my knee up the day before. So that's one of the high and lows of the World Cross Countries. Yeah.
Natasha.
Like Lucy, I have many, I don't know, I've probably raced cross country, I'd say 100 races. So there's so many, and I look back and the question is tactically, the smartest tactical race. Well, there's been many races that I didn't run very smart, and they had good results and they had bad results. So my last cross country race is probably, it's my favorite race because I ended up winning, but I didn't run smart for most of the race until the last bit. So my coach told me, don't lead. What did I do? I led the whole thing.
And I just felt good. So looking back, I'm happy that I did, because sometimes if you feel good, you need to go for it. And that's how I felt on that day. So I went for it, except I was a little bit aggressive and I gapped the group, and then with 2K to go, they caught me. And with about 1,500 meters left, it was an 8K race, I got passed by 3 girls. And I was like, oh, I'm tired. You know, they passed me and they got about 10 meters on me, and I was like, wait a second, I led this whole race, I'm gonna win it. So I like caught back up, and I was like, okay. And then Rachel Hanna, she took off. You guys know who Rachel Hanna is? Yeah, she's real good. So she took off, and then I was like, I passed the other 2 girls, and I'm like, okay, like second place is like pretty good. You know how you're like, second place is good, I'll be happy with that. And then I was like, damn it, no, you're gonna win. And I was angry, and she was already at this point probably, I would say, I don't know, like 30 or 40 meters ahead of me. And I made the decision in my mind that I was going to catch her and I was going to win this race, because I had done the work and I was strong. So I caught her with about 50 meters to go up the last hill. And that to me, it was the decision. It would have been easy, and like many, many times before in my running career, I would have just been like, second's fine, I'm hurting. But I decided, no, not today, I really, really want this. And it was more mental than physical, I think, why I won the race, because it really, really, really hurt. But I did, and I was really proud of myself for leaving it all out there that day. Even though it wasn't the race plan I had set out, I still made smart decisions in the race when it mattered.
What were you thinking when, like, do you have that gap of confidence when the other group caught you? Like,
oh yeah.
Did you think, okay, well, there goes the race? Or?
I didn't think there goes. I was really surprised, because I think I took off and didn't think. I thought I made a big enough move that they weren't going to get me, and I was like, uh-oh. Now I'm really tired.
Yeah.
That was stupid. But you know, it's racing, so you gotta like change your plan as the race goes along sometimes, and that's what happened. So I had to do that.
And I think that's one of the things, you know, like cross country is really a thinking game. Like more so than a track race where you're just kind of hanging in and zombieing out behind somebody until, you know, the race gets harder and harder. But with cross country, it really is a thinking game. Like, how do you approach it differently, John, say a cross-country race, bearing that in mind, than say if you were just to go and do like a
Well, I think the big difference, well, road races are somewhat the same. Like, to me, it's when you're on the track, you always get the splits,
yeah.
right? So you sort of have that in the back of your mind, and you know, for me, my 10K pace was like 66-second laps or whatever the heck it was, right? So you always start, how close to my pace am I? Versus in cross country, you have no idea. You don't really care. It's all by how you feel, and that's why the World Cross Country start at sub 60 for the first 400. Everyone's insane, but you know, it's more of a war of attrition in those. And it's kind of fun that way, because it's one of those opportunities where you can do that. You don't go by pace. You just go by how you feel, and it's every man or woman for themselves. So I think that's the cool part about it.
So I mean, you know, if we look at cross country, some people run really well at cross country, some people run really well at all disciplines, right? I could never really run cross country that well unless it was very much like a road race. So what do you think makes a good cross country runner? Rachel, what do you think differentiates somebody that's just like brilliant at cross country?
I think people that are good at cross country are able to be calm for the first half, typically much longer races than what you'd see on the track, except for the 10K. So I think it's really important to just be patient, especially if you're fit, and just let the course do the work. If you're the fittest one there, the hills will take it out of everyone else. And then, but as Natasha said, when it's time to hurt, a good cross country runner is also able to turn it on and really take a risk, maybe at the right point in the course, and use the course to the advantage at that point. And go ahead.
Did you have something to add?
No, I think Lucy said it best, is using the parts of the course that are the hardest to your advantage, because that's when the majority of people are going to be like, oh, I'm going to slow down because I'm going up a hill, or it's muddy here, or it's windy, and that's where you can make that gap and then make a move. So there's been plenty of times where it's been the muddy part of the course, I'm like, I'm going to move through this fast, and they're not. because it's so easy in cross country to be like, oh, this is hard, I'm gonna slow down. I'm gonna slow down here, I'm gonna slow down here in this corner. Instead, you take those and you're like, that muddy corner, I'm gonna hammer it. Yeah. At least for me.
Do you train for that?
Well,
do you train specifically for those kind of like sudden changes of plan, or for being tough on hills or stuff like that? Is that part of what you're training?
well, I was very fortunate when National Cross was at Jericho for 4 years, and that's where I lived 3 kilometers from there. So we did a lot of training there, so I knew the course really well, so I was able to, know in the parts where it was going to be hard, those were the parts that I was going to push through. So I knew, and yeah, like, you gotta try training that. Like, sometimes a lot of people really hammer the hills, up the hills. I would hammer down the hills, and that would usually catch people off guard because they just coast down the hill. I'm like, all right, you're tired because you went too hard up the hill.
I was going to say, to me, a cross-country runner, and one that does well, plays to their particular abilities. Like, some people are strong on the hills. One story about that, you remember John Castellano. I remember OFSA in high school when I ran in grade 13. He had great tactics. He tended to like accelerate on top of the hill. Like, everyone was pushing, everyone was tired, and everyone gets to the top and kind of go, made it. And then he just took off. I was like, holy crap. But that was just his strength. And some people are really strong in the soft conditions, hard conditions, ups and downs. And using all those things to your advantage, that's the trick.
Also, you guys don't know, but John Castellano was what, 3rd or 4th at World Cross? Third at World Cross, and had run a 13:52 as high school student.
High school, yeah.
He's from Ontario.
I remember watching like that the race that John was talking about in Norway, the Stavanger race. It was my first World Cross.
Yeah.
It was Stavanger, Norway, the one you can tent in.
Yeah.
And I had run earlier because the senior women ran first, and Lynn Kanuka came 3rd that year,
Yeah.
the Canadian. Anyway, and then so I watched the senior men's race, and it was mud, like it was this thick mud the whole way, like it was relentless. In fact, I remember racing, and I was watching the woman in front of me, and I would just step wherever she stepped because she'd already kind of sunk the mud in. So I would just run right there. And then I watched the men's race, and that was the year John Ngugi won, this incredible Kenyan, and he really stretched it out. He really stretched it out. And I remember watching him run across the mud like it was not mud. Like like other runners were like sinking into the mud, and he was somehow flying across the mud. And I was a really young runner at the time. I was only 19. And I remember the take-home message for me was kind of like embracing anything that happens. And on the track, you're always going to get the same surface. It doesn't really change. Sometimes it's wet, and sometimes it's blue, and sometimes it's red. But in cross country, you can show up at a race and you have no idea. It can be grass, it can be gravel, it can be mud. We've had races where you had to jump over hay bales because they wanted you to have some kind of obstacle, and you just have to absolutely embrace everything that comes at you in cross country. And so, like I said, I wrote this article once. It was called "The Game of Racing," and cross country is the funnest game ever if you can embrace it at that. You're all laughing at me. It is. It takes racing to another level because these things to put together and to try your best at through the course of that one race. And I think it's a real gift when you can embrace that and say, I'm going to be good at every single part of this course. Yeah.
So now, did your training change for cross country versus like if you're doing a road race?
Yep. Yeah,
What was your training like when you were training for cross country?
Well, I used to love everything. I loved track. I loved road racing. Road racing was nice as a young athlete because you got some money for it, and it kind of helped fund your passion. But I actually really loved road racing. Road racing is super cool. But so I used to go from indoor track to outdoor track, road racing to cross country. And all I would do, I mean, it all helps. It all makes you fit. But we would train very specifically for cross country. They would be short, very hard intervals because you'd bring all your fitness from the rest of the year into the cross country season, and then you would just get really, really specific. Only running on grass, only trying to mimic whatever surface you thought you were going to run on. And pre-running courses over and over again. If you couldn't go run that exact course, you'd find, like if you knew Nationals was going to be on grass, you wouldn't go run loops at Elk and Beaver Lake. You would go, or Stanley Park, you would go make sure you did all your intervals on grass. So it was still the short, hard, high-intensity intervals, but you would just try to mimic the surface you were going to be racing on.
How about you, Rachel? Do you change your training much?
Definitely. Our coach, actually this time of year, has a loop he gives us where we go, he just goes out of his way to find a grassy field, and then he puts cones around it and just has us run around over and over again until it gets torn up. Just especially knowing this year that Nationals are in Kingston, it's going to be muddy. If you're going to be, you don't need to be on the same course, but it helps. But if you know your course is going to be hilly, you want to try to get some hills in, and if it's going to be muddy, and same thing. So.
Do you? Well, you guys are training together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So same coach. There's coached by Richard Lee. So, you know, when you weren't with Richard, or even with Richard, did you have? You know, did you see your training for cross country to be significantly different than training for, say, a 10K road race?
Yeah, for sure. I always trained for cross country like completely off the track. Usually I didn't step on the track until after cross country December. So yeah, a lot more stuff on the grass, a lot more stuff in the trails, things like that. So, and like because I do so many road races like Lucy, my training isn't 100% specific for cross country because I really only do one cross country race in the fall. So I'm doing still some stuff on the roads and some tempo stuff, but usually once a week, yeah, we're out, you know, trudging through the grass and the mud and the pouring rain, like today, but makes you tough.
So, John, you mentioned something about like just the craziness of those start at World Cross. Did you train for that? Like, did you train to do workouts to accommodate that sort of a jolt of lactic acid right at the start versus a more even-paced race?
Well, not specifically, but I mean, part of your training and certain type of intervals certainly helps you prepare for that.
Yeah.
The shorter stuff, the short rest, you know, a lot of speed.
Yeah.
And so not specifically. And of course, World Cross Countries is in March, and living in Ottawa, it's not exactly the best place to train. We had indoor track sometimes. I actually train on the Rideau Canal with spikes on, which is why I have Achilles surgery to look at later. But yeah, so, you know, you do what you can do, but, you know, I think over the years doing all the short intervals, you were ready for it. And again, some people can adapt to that, can handle a shot of lactic acid and then actually process it and come back faster.
I can remember watching you do repeat 300s at the Coliseum track with very short rest, right?
Yeah.
So I imagine that was kind of the same sort of thing?
Yeah, 20 300s with, well, 100-meter jog rest, so
yeah.
Turned out to be about 35 to 40 seconds. That's pretty common.
Yeah, and just, I think you were handling them in, if I recall correctly, somewhere around 48 seconds.
Yeah, I actually did it 2 sets of 10, started the first set 48, 47, and then finishing the second set 46 down to 43, 44.
Yeah, and just for a frame of reference, that's on a 125-meter bank track. So, so when you're hitting 43 seconds on a 125-meter banked indoor track with that short of rest, you're really flying.
Yeah, the best workout in there was 6 times a K at 2:45 with 1 minute rest.
Okay.
So this is
20 seconds
interesting.
per lap.
So note that the work that Cam was doing this morning was on much longer rests, but you know, you look at what John's training was like. John's training was off of very short rest, so like a completely different kind of angle on things. Why do you think that like you can have that kind of a difference and yet still get similar results?
I don't know. I mean, for us, I mean, we still probably did workouts like that. I wasn't listening to what he was doing. I've read some stuff about it. You know, I don't think there's one exact formula. You know, at the end of the day, the most important thing for me when it comes to training is to do it year after year after year after year, stay healthy, you know, and build a base and then build the speed into it. You know, that's just what we did. A lot of short rest. Although in the winter time, I did a lot of stuff because we didn't have any track all the time too. There was a lot of stuff, just 1 minute repeats with 1 minute rest, or you know, 6 minutes with 4 or 5 minute rest, just sort of, and just on the clock, just running along the canal. Yeah. Nothing too specific.
Yeah. So I think some people respond differently to the same stimulus. Like some athletes do really well off of lower volume and lots of short reps, and some people really need to hit maybe less workouts but higher volume. And as you get older and you stay in the sport, especially if you have a coach that really works with you, you start figuring out what you need to be your best, and it's not the same for every athlete. So it's important.
you know, you hit on volume, and that's a really interesting thing. I mean, like, you've got the, you know, your total mileage for the week, and obviously you're cycling that based on where you are in your training in the year, but also you're fluctuating that. But then you have like your long runs too as volume. So what kind of volume, we'll go to Natasha, what kind of volume do you like to hit when you're training?
I'm a little different than most like half marathon 10K girls. My volume is quite low compared to most, and I always thought, oh, I need to run more mileage, then I'll get faster. So I tried doing that and I didn't get faster. I just got injured. So you have to find what works for you. It's trial and error. I'm 34. It's taken me a long time to figure out what works for me. So going out and pounding the mileage isn't necessarily a good idea. So I'm telling you that. Listen, you don't need to run that much to be fast. But my typical week is usually about 110K. Sometimes I'll get up to 120. Every once in a while, I'll hit 130. But usually in the off season, I'm around 90 to 100K. What? They're laughing. Is that a lot?
We weren't that when you were 14.
No. Okay. When I was in high school, like in grade 12, I ran 4 days a week. That's it. And I played soccer, metro level soccer, and on my high school basketball team, top level always until grade 12. It wasn't until I went to university that I started running more mileage. And even in university, I was running like 40 miles a week. I don't even know what that is. Yeah, it wasn't until I started competing like at a really top level that my mileage got up really high. And it took me a long time to get there. But when I was your age, no, I barely ran that much. And yeah, you've got a long time.
But it's interesting, right? Because let's just frame it in terms of what you've heard already, right? So it really is individual. So
She runs more than me.
Yeah, so you have Natasha that's running 110 kilometers a week. You had Cameron this morning that was running 220 kilometers a week.
I'm in the middle.
You're kind of in the middle.
150 or so a week.
150 per week, and what would you have been?
I never, in my whole career, ran over 90 kilometers a week.
So you see,
Except for when I went through a period where I trained for marathons. Okay, so that's a whole other ball game, and I decided marathons weren't for me. But because of the mileage, I just wasn't robust enough to do it. Not like some athletes, but I just trained short, fast. I did one long run a week, and but the thing is, I had 4 coaches. I would say I had 4 significant coaches in my life.
Yep.
I went from sort of like high school to university to post-university to finishing off with Lance. And each coach brought me something and brought me closer to my potential. And each one was a little bit different, but every coach recognized that I could not run 120 kilometer weeks. Like that became very apparent right off the bat. And but then again, I never became an Olympic marathoner either. So maybe if I had the body to run 180 kilometers a week, I could have, but I just didn't.
but now you were doing a lot of cross training too, right?
I started cross training at 29 or 30 and turned out that cycling was an incredible addition for me. I actually could combine cycling and running perfectly. It really, really helped my running strength. Not everybody is like that, and that was a gift to me because I probably would have been a lot more injured if I didn't do that. But then I also gained another career in triathlon, so I enjoyed that as well.
Do you guys do other work other than running? What sort of other additional stuff, Natasha? You're nodding, so I'm gonna give you the nod first, and we'll work down the way.
Do any of you guys follow me on Instagram?
I will.
Yeah, so people that follow me on Instagram know that I'm a huge yoga person, so I do yoga at least once a week. And I do a lot of strength training, so you're gonna see all my little workout videos that I do. I've been doing strength training twice a week, every week, except maybe when I'm traveling, it goes a bit, but for the last 3.5 years, and the difference in my strength is amazing. I feel so much stronger, and it's really great, and you get that core going, because the core is so important to your running. Yeah, and the yoga is good because as us runners, we're so tight. And that's like, yoga is an opportunity for 2 things. It's to relax, get those muscles stretched out because we don't take enough time to stretch, which is important. And for the mental strength, because how often do you work on, you work on the running. So it's a nice opportunity to take the time to do some meditation, learn to breathe, learn to focus. And that's really helped, is like learning to focus and like take the time, train your brain.
I'm not a huge fan of cross training. I mean, it's something for me I associate with being injured. So, but I really think it's important to be proactive. I mean, I'm really, touch wood, I've had a really good injury track record, and I hope that continues. And a huge part of it is the second I feel something, even doubt, I don't run. So I run high mileage, but only if everything's 100%. So I do kind of cross train on a need-to basis, but yeah, I like the elliptical a lot, and then I try to pool run once a week, just if I have time to kind of. But again, with cross training, it's about, for me, being proactive. I prefer running, but you really don't want to be cross training because you waited too long to start cross training. So.
John?
Kept it pretty simple, not a lot. In the winter months, as you sort of came off your Christmas break and started getting the next year ready, did a lot of easy sort of strength work, not heavy lifting or anything, but a lot of that sort of stuff at the university. And then when the spring came along, did more outside, sort of like sprinters drills and that kind of stuff. I regularly did that two to three times a week. Instead of a morning run, I would do that. Just find a grassy field somewhere and do A's and B's and all kinds of drills like that. That was actually good strength work.
Yeah. Did you keep skiing?
No, not really. No, I skied till high school and then did do it occasionally, but no, sometimes I just went. When we had those crazy days in Ottawa when the snow was like 4 feet high, it seemed like just run in the snow. It's actually a good workout.
Yeah. It's very good.
It sucks, but it's good work.
I just wanted to make a comment.
Yeah.
Is there anybody in here that prefers track to cross country?
Depends.
I'm just gonna give you a little plug for why you should do cross country anyway. Because from everything we've talked about here, like cross country is there's way more qualitative features to cross country. The course, the weather, the surface, the field changes from week to week, and cross country kind of teaches you how to be tough. And it does. It teaches you, if you embrace it and decide to be tough on the really gross days and through the mud, and decide to just tell yourself you're just going to go run it and do the best you can. What I've seen, because I'm coaching now, so I've been in the sport now for 30 years as a competitor and a coach, is athletes that can embrace adverse conditions, and you just get them way more in cross country because the weather sucks more in the fall. If you can embrace the adverse conditions, you can just deal with anything. And I'm not just talking about if it rains during your 1500 meter final. I'm talking about if your flight is delayed on the course to nationals. Like having done something tough and built up the resiliency and the coping mechanisms to like, hey, I can do this. It helps you in every other aspect of your racing career because you're going to get thrown all kinds of curveballs as you keep on going through your racing career. So I really, really encourage people to do cross country even when they don't love it. I encourage them to go out and to try it and do the best they can. And the other added physical bonus is that it's a part of your season which is off track and off road. And it gives young developing bodies a chance to recover, still run hard and race hard and work on your physiology without all the really hard pounding of the asphalt and the track. And it makes your feet stronger. It does. It makes your feet stronger because you're on uneven surface and you're in your spikes, so your feet have to work a little harder. So there's some three little bonuses there for you track people at the back to do cross country.
Let's open it up to questions. You probably have some great questions for the panel about cross country. I mean, you're all in the midst of a cross country season. I would say all, but probably 99% of you. So. Hey, why don't you wade in with some questions? Yeah, Lyndon.
How do you guys cope with the pain, like when you're racing and think, oh, I can't go any farther, I'm done, I just want to give up?
Every single cross country race. If you don't feel that way, it's not cross country. That's kind of
you know, the discomfort is your friend. It is. It's just what I was just talking about embracing the weather or embracing how tough the surface is. If you're hurting out there, then you have to think and know that everybody else is too. And the voice I used to tell myself in my head was, they're hurting, I'm going to be tougher. And it wasn't even personal. I actually didn't really know who was behind me. It was just, oh my gosh, this is so painful, but I'm gonna do this anyway. There is a little bit of what I call the suffer gene present in cross-country runners. There are people who are willing to hurt. and at the finish of the race, you just feel super great because it hurt and you still did it.
You feel great because it's over.
True.
Natasha, how do you deal with the pain?
Like Lucy, same thing. I always tell myself that if I'm hurting, and I don't mean this to come off cocky, but if I'm hurting, I'm fit. These people are hurting more than me because I'm real fit. So I think that. So I'm like, they must be hurting more. And so I'm going to be tough. And I also, like, you can't let those negative thoughts come in your head. So like I said before, you know, you're like, oh, I'm hurting. Oh, man, I'm going to slow down a bit. Oh, this is really hard. Second is fine. No. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. It's like a train in my head. I've trained myself to do that is yes, yes, push, push, push. And if you only let those words go in, you can't let the negative, you're going to do well. It happens. It's happened with me.
I think one of the great things about cross country also is that, I mean, I love track. I'm a track runner first and foremost. So one great thing about cross country is you don't know your split. So when you start hurting on the track, you might have an off lap and you'll be aware of that and the momentum might go the other way. In cross country, you won't know that you slowed down. So you can have a moment to be like, you know what, I'm just gonna not relax, but kind of chill mentally for the next 100 meters to that tree, and then I'm going to turn back on. So you can really, again, use the course to your advantage, especially when you're suffering mentally to refocus, which I think is great.
I was going to say, I think the reason it hurts is that you don't have those splits. You know, you don't know that you're running probably faster than you might not on the track, because on the track you'll go, oh, you know, my pace is this, and if I go fast, you back off before you have the chance to hurt. So that's to me why cross country was fun. I mean, to me the pain was, I don't know, it didn't really bother me. It was just part of what it was, and just that's what made it fun. You know, you're always, in cross country too, you're always kind of just running against the people around you. Mm-hmm. You know, there could be people 100 meters ahead of you or behind you, but that you sort of are aware of the people around you and you're just trying to beat them. Yeah. Right? Who cares about the guy 100 meters ahead? Well, you sort of do, but at the same time, there's not much you can do about it, but you want to try and beat the person next to you. That's how Brucey felt when I ran against him in grade 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, Coop.
What are your thoughts on like distance equality? Because I know right now there's debate on, like, I'm sure NCAA, CIS, that the women run the same distances as men. And I just haven't talked to any professional.
It's a good question. Good for you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Does everyone know what the question was or what the topic is?
Yeah, Justine was raising it this morning at the workout. Like, why in high school do I have to get to run 4.3K when the senior boys get to run 6K? Like, why can't I run 6K? So it's even at this level, and it's also at the national championship.
Even this year.
First year sequel, yeah.
Athletics Canada, you can take notes now.
Well, they fixed it.
Yeah, the women we're running 10K this year.
And I'm so excited for that.
Like the men. But I also feel like you can't, I totally think it should be equal, absolutely. But you can't just go from the girls running, all of a sudden they're running 4K this year to being like, oh, you're running 8K next year. Like, there's got to be, I think, a gradual, next year you're running 6, then 7, then 8. I don't think they can just put it all in 1 year, but I think it should be equal eventually.
Yeah, and it also opens up some questions. This is a bit of a different topic, but I know a lot of people have started this huge debate at the university level. Are the women able to run 10K? Is it smart to have university-age women run 10K, which to me raises the question of, should men be running 10K? It's not that there's a right or wrong answer, but
should everybody be running 8K?
Exactly, yeah. And so, I'm not saying because a lot of you guys are going to go on to university and run 10K, so I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but I really strongly think it should be. I think we know enough about science now to know women are just as capable in distance, and they should be the same. So.
Rob, can you come over, because we are filming this. We're gonna, we're gonna make it available to other athletes.
I was at the School Sport Canada AGM 2 weekends ago, and the topic came up, and because we were there, they wanted to know our thoughts on that. So you get all the provincial, all the BC high school, all the provincial guys across the board saying, what should we do on that? Because there's a big discrepancy between what BC does and what Ontario does and the whole thing. CIS was also at this meeting, so of course they're piping in and saying, well, what do we do as well? Interesting, the one Ontario had proposed, and it seemed to work a little bit with the audience, was that both the guys and girls were going to run 6 kilometers. Now, we know that internationally, both guys and girls are running, the seniors, are running 10 kilometers. So would it make sense at a CIS level for both guys and girls to run 8 kilometers? So it was something that was sort of being thrown around there. I don't know what the right answer is. To Natasha's point though, there should be a progression, right? So you shouldn't be going from 4 to 10 or 6 to 10. There needs to be a gradual build to it.
So would that mean that the CIS distance would be 8K for both?
They would need to vote on it and approve it, but it's just an idea that there would be then a progression of at a high school level you're running 6K, at a CIS, at a collegiate level you're running 8K, and when you get to the senior level you're running 10K.
I think it makes no sense for men and women to run different distances.
I agree.
I think it makes no sense from an equality perspective, from a message we send girls perspective, from a message we send boys. You know, we get to run, you know, more than the girls. Are we stronger? And it used to drive me nuts because my whole career, it was like the guys ran 12K at Worlds and I ran 6. And in my last nationals as a senior, well, not my last nationals as a competitive senior, I almost ran in the men's race. I almost started the men's race because I wanted to show everybody that women could run 10K. And I didn't, because I didn't want to give up my medal. But I was too competitive, but too much ego. But it was, like triathlon, for instance, from the get-go, they just made the distances equal for men and women. They actually gave them separate races. And the women of the countries just, they built around that premise that there were going to be equal distances. In the Olympics, we all run the same distances now. We didn't for years. But, you know, women don't run 3/4 of a marathon in the Olympics. So it really just doesn't make much sense for the races not to be equal. I think that's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, curious.
It's like the comment, Bruce, it might sound as heresy, but my experience growing up in England in the 1970s and 80s, England had some really great 10,000 metre runners, 5,000, 10,000 metre runners, and a lot of them in their winter training, the South of England championships across the country or the national championships were 9 miles for hills and mud for senior men's. So you think of that 16 kilometers, and junior men, so that would be 18-year-olds, would be doing 6 miles, 10K, and youth age group was 4 miles. But women did up to, they did 10K cross country, but the men's race was 9 miles. And they changed that to try to get into sync with what was happening internationally. And there are many reasons why perhaps British distance running until Mo Farah has not been as strong, but a lot of people are sort of pointing the finger that the runners were not as well prepared aerobically as they were perhaps in the 1970s and 80s when England had just greater depth of cross-country running. Now, it's a complex argument whether there's merit to that, should those distances be that long, but some of the great runners, Steve Ovett, Sebastian Coe, their names have been mentioned, they all took part in those cross-country races, Ovett especially, and were very well conditioned aerobically for their season as they prepared. I think realistically it's probably too much to expect that we'll go back to those days of 9 miles, hills and mud. But I take the point of equality. I think whatever the women's, whatever the men's race distance should be, it should be the same for women. I think there's no reason why it shouldn't be.
So I guess the next question from the floor. Somebody got something else they want to ask?
They're tired.
So I got a question for you. I mean, one of the things that you know, Gary mentioned that a lot of aerobic development happens during the cross country season, and you know, we talked about kind of a top end for what people are doing for mileage and that sort of thing. One of the things though that we didn't talk about was just the whole concept of a long run. So you know what, John, when you were training, what was your long run like?
An hour and 50.
An hour and 50.
That was it. No, 50.
50.
75 minutes.
75 minutes. And how often would you do that? Every week or?
Yeah, usually Sunday.
Yeah.
I mean, my training program was super simple. It was half an hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon, intervals 2 days a week, tempo run on Saturday, and the long run on Sunday.
That
That was
was
it.
exactly the same.
But the only time I changed it was when I ran the marathon, which is a whole other discussion. But no, it was pretty simple. But my pace was generally fairly fast too on my easy runs. I typically coasted sort of 37 to 40 minute 10K pace.
Yeah.
All the time. So.
Rachel, what are you doing for long run?
Long runs, I always build them up slowly, so I'll start the season doing 75, 80 for long run minutes, but then by the end of the season, the goal will be to be up to about an hour 45 on a long run. But again, when you do something like that, even up to an hour 50, you need to be really careful that the day after is easy, because it starts becoming a workout in itself when you go too long on your long runs.
When I was in college, my longest run was 80 minutes. In high school, probably an hour. Now my longest run will be an hour 40, but I generally stick around 80 minutes. I'm just competing all year round. So there's never really, there's only a few times throughout the year where I'm actually able to, like Rachel said, you have to get up there. So I feel like by the time I get up there, I'm like, oh, I'm racing for the next 2 months. So then, yeah, but.
Actually, on that note, in high school it was 70 minutes, the absolute longest I ever did. It takes years to get up to that type of volume.
I don't know if I ran over an hour in high school.
Yeah.
It's a different generation. I didn't even know what the concept of long run was in high school.
Yeah.
I will honestly say that. I used to run the 3 cross-country practices a week, played basketball and soccer, and any other school sport I could get my hand on. And then on the weekends, I used to hike. So my first coach in university used to think that my 6 to 8 hour hikes on the weekends were a huge part of my just aerobic development as an athlete. And so I didn't start doing long runs until I hit university, and they started off at an hour. By the time I finished university, they were 75 minutes. Most of my career, my long run was 90. Until I started training for half marathons, and then that long run had to move up to about 2 hours. But
Most of high school I did 6 miles, that was it.
yeah, high school was just cross country workouts for me in high school for sure.
10K.
Yeah, with a whole bunch of cross training.
But now you were also cross country skiing too.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see my kids are skiing now, and they're competitive skiers, national level, my oldest, and they train very differently. They do 3-hour runs and 10-hour weeks, and you know, they have my daughter's treated up to 600 hours a year. But they count everything. They count circuit training, weight training, but they do this long, slow stuff. It's very, very different.
Yeah.
Of course, a lot of it's not impacting. They roller ski and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
The problem with running is all the impact. So.
Yeah, it was very interesting. I had a role with the Canadian Olympic Committee, and one of the things I did was I put together what they call the Post-Olympic Excellence Series, where we brought in a lot of the athletes that were retiring from after 2010. And we did like a transition weekend with them as to, you know, what do you do with your life now? And I got a chance to go for some runs with some of the skiers, right? And it was very much along that line, because it was like, well, so what do you guys do? And they were saying, oh yeah, well, we'll do like, we'll do a 5-hour run up in the mountains. It's really, really slow.
Well, it's like a hike almost.
Well,
they walk all the hills.
Well, yeah, I mean, they were saying that they would do a 50K run. Yeah, just not very long, very low volume, and that was their.
Yeah, this summer my son did a roller ski. They did 35K.
Yeah.
And he's 15.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Yeah, Coop.
So, I don't know how to word it, but like, what do you guys think about high schoolers doing a lot of volume?
Don't do it.
90 minutes, long runs.
Why?
I think what you're
Like what? Like
the big thing is, I mean, if you love running, no, seriously, if you love running and you love running in trails, I wouldn't stop a high schooler from going and doing a long, easy run in trails on the weekend. I mean, that can be a huge part of your mental health as well as your training.
But doing a 90-minute run for the sake of doing one, I wouldn't recommend. You know, like, it's so important. Like, I mean, doing it because you want to go for a long whatever. I think it's just really important you finish high school relatively rested, not injured, and loving the sport. And
well, I also think there's a physiological thing happening here, and your time to develop your speed is now.
Yeah.
I can't develop any more speed in my life. I've done all my speed work, and now when I'm running, I'm just tapping into what I did when I was 18 and 25. all the motor patterns I laid down. So the huge part of development at this age is actually your speed. So you want to be making sure that you're getting your speed work in, and you're not compromising your speed by doing these long runs on the weekend that you show up tired on your Tuesday night workout or your Thursday night workout. And that was a huge problem for me, actually, because I used to love running. I used to love just going for a run, but I'd show up for my interval workouts tired. Yeah. Until finally one day my coach said, "Lucy, what'd you do yesterday?" And I went for a 16-minute run at 6 mile pace. I'm like, no wonder I'm tired, you know. So it was to be able to balance that out. But for sure, I think most coaches in the room who have all their, you know, obviously all the physiological training behind coaching and development would tell you that you should be focusing more on speed than distance at this time in your life. Your endurance will come.
And then Bruce, I know.
I have a different perspective.
Yeah,
so
like,
that's why this is called baiting.
Okay.
I know what Bruce thinks, but I don't think like other people know what Bruce thinks. So like, what are your thoughts, Bruce?
Yeah, I think
I have a comment.
Yeah, sure.
So, I guess coming from where I'm coming from, if I had been a different athlete in high school and college, so like doing a lot of the mileage and stuff, I wouldn't be where I am today. There's no chance in hell I would have gone to the Olympics when I was 34 years old. It just wouldn't be sustainable. So you can, like, if you want to run heavy mileage in high school and through college, you'll probably be a better athlete than I was in high school and college. And that's great. Maybe you'll do well, but will you have a long, sustainable career? I don't know. It's really hard to run. It's not impossible, but how many girls from high school that were standout high school stars do you see that are still running in their 30s, that are still like at the top level? Very, very few, right? Like I'm one of the only ones I know that was in high school that's still racing.
Well, there's a lot of other factors involved.
Well, there's tons of factors, but I'm just saying where I'm coming from, like if I had done the big mileage in high school, I wouldn't be the athlete I am today.
You'd be burned out.
Yeah, I'd be totally burned out. Yeah, and I took 3 years off too. But you know, everyone's different, and like if I had maybe a little bit more success in high school, maybe I would have tried and done the mileage and whatever. But I think it's also different now. I think high school students are running way more mileage than they used to. Like every school is. Yeah.
Well, you were a multi-athlete though in high
Yes.
school. So you could add up that volume playing basketball.
That's right.
And
Yeah,
all
so
the
like
soccer, high-level soccer, so you were actually putting in the time, maybe not the mileage, but the time.
You ran a marathon really young.
So yeah, so I guess my view, because Coop's kind of set me up for this, but it's good. So my view is kind of, I guess I take a different perspective. I think, you know, when it comes to, there's a couple different angles on this. First is, people are worried that, you know, just as Natasha said, look, if you do too much volume, you're going to burn out. And I guess where I come from on this is that, you know, and John, you can attest to this, we grew up in a time in Ottawa where to say it was a high watermark of junior running is not exaggerating. I mean, like, you know, in our training group, we probably had, not exaggerating, and granted we had grade 13, but we had probably 10 kids under 2 minutes, we had a kid that was third and another kid that was fourth at OFSA in their senior year for 1500. The kid that was third ran 349, the kid that was fourth ran 350. It was a really tough group, and I look at all of those kids and they were training pretty hard. And I think that the only people that really continued with the sport after that in that whole area, one was Mark Olson, and he was the first sub 4 minute high schooler. John.
In the mile.
Yeah, in the mile. And John, and then myself. I think that the people that dropped, they dropped not because they'd done too much training, they dropped because they had better opportunities. Right? Job, school, girlfriend, different opportunities that they judged to be better. And better is always in the minds of what you've got in front of you and what you want to do out of life.
Bruce and I didn't have girlfriends.
Yeah, monk-like. So I think that what happened is that, you know, they didn't drop because of the training. And then I look at, well, like, if I was in other sports, you know, and I look at the volume of other sports, swimming, you know, we're talking cycling, we're talking a triathlon, we're talking about skiing. There is a volume of aerobic activity that builds aerobic fitness. And so I look at, well, how can we get a volume of aerobic activity that builds aerobic fitness on soft surfaces and that sort of thing. And if I can, my view is if I can get a long run, it means that I can keep the overall mileage of the week lower and still develop aerobic stuff. So it means that instead of having kids trying to do, and granted there's some kids that can handle higher volumes, but instead of kids trying to do, high school kids doing 70 miles a week or 110 kilometers a week, I can get a lot of benefit out of kids doing lower mileage, but having a longer run on one day of the week. So that's kind of my perspective on long runs and how it's a little different than some folks. Yeah?
Yeah, I just want to add my thoughts on this. I coach a couple women right now who are in their 30s and running at a pretty high level, and they have totally different backgrounds. One of them, Laura, ran at World Half Marathon Championship. She only started running, you know, seriously 2 years ago, maybe. Before that, she ran somewhat recreationally, and she played kind of, you know, rec league soccer and that. And, you know, the other one was very competitive as a teenager. She ran long distance. She ran 37 minutes at 17 years old, I think, for 10K, which isn't like crazy, but it's, you know, not too many 17-year-old women are running 10K. She did that at Canada Games. And now she's 30 and she's running 34 low, which is just kind of getting there. So I think that the perspective on mileage that I have is, I agree with what Lucy said, that at this time in high school, you know, you need to work on your speed, because if you don't now, then it's going to be a lot harder to later. But I don't think that means that you can't run more volume, because I think the volume takes longer to build. So you got to start now, not to say that you all need to run 100K a week, but it's progressive. So what are you doing now? Whatever you're doing now, look at that and see if you can do a little more each season. You know, think long term. And when you're doing it, and maybe this is controversial, I don't know, but my thoughts on it are, do it slow. There's no reason to run hard on your easy runs, because the physiological advantages of easy running come at a floor, not a ceiling. So like, just to throw some numbers out there, if you run 5K in 20 minutes, so it's 4 minutes a K, you don't need to run your easy runs any faster than like 5:15 maybe. You know, if you do, it's not worse, but it's a bigger stress on your body. So you could run at 4:45, you get the same benefit, but at a higher stress level than if you run at 5:30. So why not run 5:30? You get the same benefit, but you're not stretching your body out. So then the next day or 2 days later, you can go and you're fresh for those workouts. You're not feeling burnt out. I don't think, like I just can't think of anyone I know who's burnt out from volume. You burn out from volume plus intensity plus frequency too much. Those are the three elements you have: volume, intensity, and frequency, and that's the balance you have to have there, and make sure that you're not overloading them all kind of together. So anyway, that's kind of my focus on it.
And along those lines, I mean, we had Cam here in university. He was doing 160, 170 miles a week, and yet he was the most feared kicker at 5K and 10K. So it's not like if you have volume, you can have speed development. Speed development is alactic. It has more to do with your neural system. Volume has, you're working on your aerobic system. So, you know, we kind of have to wrap it up. I'm looking at the time. So I just want to thank all of our speakers. And what's going to happen now, well, first of all, we'll thank them. So. And we have some stuff. We come with goodies. Okay, you like stuff. Okay, so I think you said, who was it that wanted extra small?
I think
That wouldn't be me.
Small or extra small? Extra small?
But it doesn't matter.
Small.
You want to close my shirt?
it's a shirt. Thank you.
So
That's cute.
we don't have the budget for to pay speaker fees that are what you guys are worth. But we do kind of try to give you something that's kind of a cool gift.
Oh.
What it used to look like.
Let me see, Phil.
See, it's so good.
Oh yeah, I know that picture.
Oh, that's how you wanted photos. Cute.
That's what you got to look forward to, guys.
Wow, that's cute.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, thanks. The Harriers.
So maybe we want to, let's get a shot here. So thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your experience with us. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Good luck this season and have fun.
Yeah, that's the most important.